All you need is to tighten the workforce and invest more funds into the PR, ma'am, and you'd see results in 3 months.
My goodness, that's incredibly insightful, dear.
Sonia Mensah sat in seat 12A of the first-class cabin, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the email on her tablet. The 67-year-old black billionaire was watching her empire crumble in real time. Her luxury hotel company, built over 4 decades from absolutely nothing, was collapsing. And beside her, a 9-year-old girl named Piper was about to offer her a napkin that would change everything. What happened in the next 4 hours would save a billion-dollar company from destruction and transform 2 families forever. Let me take you back to how it all began. Sonia Mensah was not supposed to be crying on this flight. She was supposed to be celebrating. The founder and CEO of Mensah Luxury Hotels had built an empire that stretched across 12 countries with 47 properties bearing her name. From Cape Town to Nairobi, from Accra to Lagos, her hotels represented African excellence and luxury at its finest. But empires can fall just as spectacularly as they rise. 40 years ago, Sonia had started with a single bed and breakfast in a quiet neighborhood in Ghana. She had nothing but a dream, a small inheritance from her parents, and an unshakable belief that she could build something extraordinary. She cleaned rooms herself, cooked breakfast for guests, answered phones at midnight, and slowly, painstakingly, built a reputation for warmth, quality, and authenticity. 1 property became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 20. And before she knew it, Sonia Mensah had become one of the wealthiest self-made women in Africa. But success has a way of attracting complications. 5 years ago, her husband passed away suddenly, leaving her alone to run the business they had built together. No children to pass it on to. No family to share the burden with. Just Sonia and her board of directors, and lately, that board had become more enemy than ally. The flight from Lagos to Accra was supposed to be a short one, barely an hour in the air. But Sonia had just come from the most humiliating experience of her professional life. An emergency board meeting where the numbers were read aloud like an indictment. Stock price down 60% in 6 months. Occupancy rates at historic lows. Revenue bleeding faster than anyone could stop it. Competitors swooping in like vultures, taking her corporate clients, attracting the younger travelers, offering sleek tech-forward experiences that made her properties look like relics from another era. And then came the ultimatum. The board wanted her out. The woman who had built this company from nothing was being told to step aside. To let someone younger, someone more in touch with modern hospitality trends take over. They gave her 6 months to turn things around or face a vote of no confidence. Sonia stared at the email from Kwame Boateng, her CFO, summarizing the meeting in cold, clinical language. Every word felt like a knife. She had held her composure in that boardroom, nodded professionally, promised to deliver results. But here, alone in seat 12A at 35,000 feet, the dam finally broke. Tears rolled down her cheeks and onto her silk blouse. Her hands shook as she gripped the tablet. She barely noticed the little girl in seat 12B. Piper Owusu was 9 years old, with bright, curious eyes that seemed to notice everything. She wore glasses that kept sliding down her nose, and she carried a backpack so stuffed with notebooks it looked ready to burst. Piper was flying home to Accra with her father, James, who sat across the aisle in seat 11C. They had just spent a week in Lagos visiting Piper's grandmother, who had been sick but was finally recovering. Piper loved these flights. Not because of the peanuts or the small TV screens, but because flights gave her time to think. Time to read. Time to watch the business and entrepreneur videos she had downloaded on her tablet. While other kids her age watched cartoons, Piper watched documentaries about companies that had come back from the brink of bankruptcy. She studied turnaround strategies. She loved puzzles, and to her, a struggling business was just another puzzle waiting to be solved. Her father, James Owusu, often wondered where she got it from. He was a construction contractor, a man who worked with his hands, who understood concrete and steel but struggled with balance sheets and business plans. His own construction company was barely surviving, taking on small residential jobs and repairs just to keep the lights on. He had bid on a major municipal contract 3 weeks ago and lost to a bigger firm. Again. He was tired, worried. But he never let Piper see it. Piper had a photographic memory, something her teachers had noticed early on. She could read something once and recall it perfectly weeks later. She could see patterns where others saw chaos. And right now, she saw the woman beside her quietly falling apart. Piper pulled a napkin from the seat pocket in front of her and tapped Sonia gently on the arm. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you okay?" Sonia flinched slightly, quickly wiping her face with the back of her hand. She turned to see a small girl with glasses looking at her with genuine concern. Sonia forced a smile, the kind of smile she had perfected over decades of business meetings where she could not afford to show weakness. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Thank you." But Piper did not look convinced. She held out the napkin. "You dropped something on your shirt." Sonia looked down and saw the tear stains on her blouse. She accepted the napkin with a quiet "thank you" and dabbed at the fabric, feeling embarrassed that a child had caught her in such a vulnerable moment. Piper settled back into her seat but kept glancing over. There was something about the sadness in the woman's eyes that Piper recognized. It was the same look her father had sometimes when he thought she was not watching. The look of someone carrying a problem too heavy to hold alone. After a few moments of silence, Piper spoke again, her voice gentle but curious. "I'm good at solving problems. If you want to talk about it." Sonia almost laughed. The absurdity of it. Here she was, a billionaire CEO with an MBA from a top university, being offered help by a 9-year-old. But something about the sincerity in Piper's voice stopped her from dismissing it entirely. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was desperation. Or maybe it was the simple human need to talk to someone who was not on her payroll. "That's very sweet of you," Sonia said, her tone warmer now. "But I don't think this is the kind of problem a young lady like you would understand." Piper adjusted her glasses and pulled her backpack onto her lap, hugging it thoughtfully. "Try me. I watch a lot of business videos. My dad says I should watch cartoons like normal kids, but I think business turnarounds are more interesting." Now Sonia did smile, a real one this time. There was something refreshing about this child's confidence. "All right," Sonia said, deciding to indulge her. "I run hotels. Luxury hotels. And right now my business is struggling." Piper's eyes lit up with interest. "How many hotels?" 47 properties across 12 countries. Piper's eyebrows shot up. "Wow, that's a lot. What's your occupancy rate?" Sonia blinked. That was not a question she expected from a child. "Excuse me? Occupancy rate. How full are your hotels on average?" Sonia hesitated, studying the girl more carefully now. "Right now, we're running at about 52% occupancy across the portfolio." Piper frowned thoughtfully. "That's not good. Industry standard for luxury is usually between 70 and 80%, right?" Sonia felt a chill run down her spine. This child knew industry standards? "That's correct." "How do you know that?" Piper shrugged. "I read a lot." "What's your pricing strategy? Are you competing on price or experience?" Sonia was fully engaged now, the tablet forgotten in her lap. She leaned slightly toward Piper, intrigued by the direction of these questions. "We try to offer premium experiences at competitive prices." "So you're trying to match what the big chains offer?" "We have to stay competitive." "But why would someone choose your hotels over Hilton or Marriott if you're offering basically the same thing?" The question hit Sonia like a punch to the stomach. It was the same question Kwame had asked in the board meeting, the same question the business consultants had danced around for months. But hearing it from a 9-year-old made it somehow more devastating. Sonia did not have a good answer. "We offer quality service, beautiful properties, excellent locations." "So does everyone else," Piper said matter-of-factly. "What makes you different?" Sonia opened her mouth to respond but found herself silent. What did make her different? 40 years ago, she knew exactly what made her special. Authenticity. Personal touch. A genuine connection to African culture and hospitality. But somewhere along the way, in the race to expand and compete with the global giants, she had lost that identity. Her hotels had become generic luxury properties that could have been anywhere in the world. "I don't know anymore," Sonia admitted quietly. Piper nodded, as if this confirmed something she had suspected. "What about your online reviews? What are people saying?" "They say we're nice. Clean. Professional." "That's boring." Sonia actually laughed at that. "Boring?" "Yeah. Nice and clean is what people say about hospitals. It's not exciting." "Do you have a social media presence?" "We have accounts, yes. But are you active? Do you tell stories? Do you show people why they should care about your hotels?" Sonia felt herself shrinking under the weight of these questions. Her marketing team handled social media, posting occasional photos of rooms and amenities. But stories? Connection? Emotion? That had been lost somewhere along the way. Before Sonia could respond, a voice came from across the aisle. "Piper. Piper, what are you doing? Leave the nice lady alone." James Owusu was half standing, reaching across the aisle with an apologetic, almost panicked expression on his face. He was a tall man with kind eyes and the rough hands of someone who worked for a living. His shirt was pressed but worn, his shoes polished but old. Everything about him spoke of pride struggling against circumstance. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. My daughter sometimes forgets her manners. Piper, come sit with me and stop bothering people." But Sonia held up a hand, surprising both of them. "Actually, she's not bothering me at all. In fact, she's asking better questions than the consultants I've paid thousands of dollars to." James looked confused. "I'm sorry? Your daughter has been asking me about my business. And frankly, she's making more sense than my entire board of directors." James sat back down slowly, looking at Piper with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. He knew his daughter was smart. Teachers had been telling him that for years. But this was different. Sonia turned back to Piper. "You said you're good at solving problems. What would you do if you were running my hotels?" Piper thought for a moment, chewing on her bottom lip the way she did when she was processing information. "Well, first I'd stop trying to be like everyone else. You said you started 40 years ago with one bed and breakfast in Ghana, right? How did you know that? You said you run luxury hotels across 12 countries. That kind of growth doesn't happen overnight. You built something from nothing. That's your story. That's what makes you different." Sonia felt tears threatening again, but for a different reason this time. But younger travelers don't care about stories. They want Instagram-worthy rooms and fast Wi-Fi. "They want both," Piper corrected. "They want experiences they can't get anywhere else. They want to feel like they're part of something authentic." "You're from Ghana, right? You're African. Your hotels are in Africa. Why are you trying to look like hotels in New York or London? Why not look like Africa?" The simplicity of it took Sonia's breath away. Why not look like Africa? Why not celebrate what made her properties unique instead of hiding it in favor of generic international luxury? "What else?" Sonia asked, leaning forward now, hungry for more. "Your competitors offer tech-forward experiences. Apps for check-in, smart rooms, all that stuff. But what if you offered tech plus something they can't offer? What if you had the apps and the smart rooms, but also had cultural ambassadors who could introduce guests to local artists and musicians? What if your hotels felt like a bridge between modern comfort and authentic African culture?" Sonia grabbed her tablet and started typing notes furiously. This child was dismantling and rebuilding her entire business strategy in the middle of a flight. "Keep going. And your corporate contracts are drying up, right? Big companies cutting travel budgets. But what about targeting a different kind of corporate client? African diaspora businesses. International companies doing business in Africa who need cultural competency training along with their accommodations. You could offer something beyond just a place to sleep. You could offer understanding." James sat across the aisle, his mouth slightly open, listening to his 9-year-old daughter consult a billionaire. He had no idea where any of this was coming from. Yes, Piper watched those videos. Yes, she read business books from the library. But this was something else entirely. Sonia looked at Piper with wonder and gratitude. "How old are you again?" 9. "But I'll be 10 in 3 months. And you just came up with all of this right now?" "I like puzzles. Businesses are just puzzles. You have pieces that aren't fitting together right. You just need to rearrange them." Sonia sat back in her seat, feeling something she had not felt in months. Hope. Real, genuine hope. This child, this 9-year-old girl she had met by chance, had given her more clarity in 15 minutes than 6 months of board meetings and consultant reports. "Piper, I need your help. I have a board meeting in 1 week where I need to present a turnaround strategy. Would you be willing to talk more about this? Maybe help me develop these ideas?" Piper's face lit up with excitement. "Really? You want my help?" "I absolutely do." James finally found his voice again. "Ma'am, I appreciate your kindness to my daughter, but surely you're not serious about having a child consult on your business?" Sonia turned to look at him directly. "Mr. Owusu. James Owusu. Mr. Owusu, your daughter just saw solutions that my highly paid executives have missed for months. I am completely serious. If she's willing and if you give permission, I would like to hire Piper as a consultant." The plane began its descent into Accra. The seatbelt sign chimed on. But none of them noticed. James looked at his daughter, then at this elegant, powerful woman who was treating her like an equal, and he felt something shift in his understanding of what was possible. "What do you say, Piper? Do you want to help save a hotel empire?" Piper grinned, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Yes. But can I still watch my entrepreneur videos?" Sonia laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. "You can watch all the entrepreneur videos you want." As the plane touched down in Accra, Sonia pulled out a business card and handed it to James. "This is my direct number and email. I meant what I said. I'd like Piper to present her ideas to my board. If you're comfortable with that. James took the card, staring at it in disbelief. Mensah Luxury Hotels. CEO and founder. A number he could actually call. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Piper whispered, tugging on his sleeve. James looked at his daughter's hopeful face and made a decision that would change both their lives. Yes. We'll help however we can. And that's how a 9-year-old girl became a consultant to a billion-dollar company. But this is just the beginning of the story. What happened next would test Sonia's courage, challenge Piper's wisdom, and ultimately transform not just a struggling hotel empire, but the lives of everyone involved. Have you ever had a moment where a complete stranger changed your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see what happens when Piper presents to the board of directors and whether her ideas actually save the company, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what comes next is even more incredible. The conversation between Sonia and Piper could have ended there. A pleasant distraction on a difficult flight. A brief encounter that both would remember fondly but never act upon. But Piper was not done. Not even close. What happened next would completely revolutionize how Sonia saw her entire business. Piper shifted in her seat, pulling one of her notebooks from her overstuffed backpack. She flipped it open to a blank page and grabbed a pen, her young face serious and focused in a way that seemed far beyond her years. Can I ask you something else, Miss Mensah? Sonia nodded, still somewhat dazed by the clarity this child had already brought to her problems. Of course. Why are you trying to beat your competitors at their own game? Sonia frowned slightly, not understanding the question. What do you mean? You said your hotels offer the same things as the big chains. Fast Wi-Fi, nice rooms, good service, tech features. You're playing on their field, by their rules. And they have way more money than you, right? More properties, bigger marketing budgets, more name recognition. So you're always going to lose if you're trying to be a smaller version of them. The words landed like stones in Sonia's chest. Piper was right. Absolutely right. For the past decade, Sonia had been chasing the industry leaders, trying to match their amenities, copy their strategies, compete for the same customers with the same value propositions. She had turned herself into a weaker imitation of companies that had far more resources. So what should I do instead? Piper tapped her pen against the notebook thoughtfully. Stop competing with them. Do something they can't do. Something they can't copy even if they wanted to. Like what? Like being you. Sonia blinked. Being me? Yeah. You're not some corporate hotel chain that started with investor money and a business plan. You're a woman who started with one bed and breakfast 40 years ago in Ghana. You built this from nothing. You're African. Your story is unique. Your perspective is unique. Your connection to the places where your hotels are located is unique. Why aren't you using that? Sonia felt something crack open inside her chest. For years, she had downplayed her origins, thinking that luxury meant erasing any trace of humble beginnings. She had presented herself as a polished CEO who could compete with anyone on the global stage. But in doing so, she had hidden the very thing that made her remarkable. I never thought about it that way. Nobody else can tell your story, Piper continued, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. Nobody else has your journey. And people love stories. Especially young people. They don't just want a nice room. They want to feel connected to something real, something authentic. They want experiences they can't get anywhere else. Piper started drawing in her notebook, sketching out ideas as she talked. Sonia leaned over to watch, fascinated. So here's what I think you should do. First, you need a cultural immersion program. Hey, what? Turn your hotels into cultural experience centers. Not just places to sleep, but places where people can actually experience the culture of wherever they're staying. Partner with local artisans, local musicians, local chefs. Make each property unique to its region. So if someone stays at your hotel in Accra, it should feel completely different from staying at your hotel in Nairobi or Lagos or Cape Town. Sonia's mind was racing now, imagining the possibilities. Go on. Right now, all luxury hotels kind of look the same, right? Marble lobbies, neutral colors, fancy furniture that could be anywhere in the world. But what if your lobby in Accra had rotating exhibitions of Ghanaian artists? What if guests could meet the artists, learn about their work, maybe even buy pieces directly? What if your hotel in Lagos partnered with Yoruba musicians who performed traditional music in the evenings and taught guests about the history and meaning of the songs? Piper was sketching rapidly now, her pen flying across the page. What if your restaurants didn't just serve generic international cuisine, but featured local chefs who could teach cooking classes? Guests could learn to make jollof rice or fufu or bunny chow, depending on where they were staying. They'd go home with memories and skills, not just photos of a nice room. Sonia felt tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of excitement, of possibility, of hope she had not felt in years. Each property becomes unique, Sonia said slowly, understanding dawning. Unreplicatable. The big chains can't copy it because it's tied to specific places, specific artists, specific cultural contexts. Exactly. Piper grinned. And you can charge premium prices because you're offering something nobody else can offer. It's not just accommodation. It's cultural education. It's authentic experience. It's connection. Sonia grabbed her tablet and started making notes frantically. This is brilliant. What else? Piper flipped to a new page in her notebook. Okay, second idea. The mentorship suites. The what? So you said your corporate contracts are drying up because companies are cutting travel budgets. But what if you targeted a different kind of traveler? Successful professionals and entrepreneurs who are working remotely or building businesses. They need more than just a hotel room. They need workspace, they need amenities, they need community. Piper drew a rough floor plan of a suite. Create special suites designed specifically for people who are working while they travel. Dedicated workspace with multiple monitors, really good internet, ergonomic furniture, soundproofing. All the tech they need. But here's the key part. Create community around it. Host evening networking events. Partner with local business schools to bring in speakers. Create entrepreneur residencies where remote workers can stay for a month or two, and they automatically become part of a community of other ambitious, creative people. Sonia was typing so fast her fingers could barely keep up. You're not just offering them a place to stay. You're offering them a network, a support system, a community of peers. Right? And people will pay a lot for that. Way more than they'd pay for just a regular hotel room. You could even create mentorship programs where successful entrepreneurs who stay at your hotels can connect with younger business owners in the local community. It becomes this ecosystem of growth and collaboration. James, still sitting across the aisle, was listening with his mouth hanging open. His daughter was designing business models like she had been doing it for decades. Where had this come from? How had he not known Piper could think like this? Sonia looked at Piper with something close to awe. These ideas are extraordinary. Is there more? Oh, there's definitely more, Piper said, flipping to another page. Third idea, the Heritage Story Campaign. Tell me. You need to make your personal story the centerpiece of your brand. Stop hiding it. Stop trying to look like every other CEO. Your journey from one bed and breakfast to 47 properties across 12 countries is incredible. It's inspiring. It represents African excellence, Black entrepreneurial success, the power of perseverance and vision. Young people, especially young Black travelers from the diaspora, will connect with that story so powerfully. Piper drew what looked like a timeline. Create a social media campaign that tells your story. Not in a boring corporate way, but in a real, emotional, human way. Show photos of your first property. Talk about the struggles, the setbacks, the moments when you almost gave up. Show how you built this empire piece by piece. Make videos, write blog posts, create content that lets people see the woman behind the brand. Sonia's hands were shaking now. This was everything she had been afraid to do. Everything she had thought would make her look weak or unprofessional. But Piper was reframing it as strength. People want to support businesses with values, with stories, with meaning, Piper continued. Especially younger generations. They don't just want to give their money to some faceless corporation. They want to support someone they believe in, someone whose journey inspires them. Your hotels become symbols of what's possible. Every time someone stays at a Mensah hotel, they're participating in this legacy of African excellence. Sonia had to put her tablet down because her vision was blurring with tears. This child understood something that all her marketing consultants had missed. People don't just buy products or services. They buy stories. They buy meaning. They buy connection to something larger than themselves. How are you doing this? Sonia whispered. How does a 9-year-old understand branding and marketing better than my entire executive team? Piper shrugged, a little embarrassed. I just watch a lot of videos about companies that turned around, and I notice patterns. Most of the time, companies fail because they forget what made them special in the first place. They start chasing trends or trying to be like their competitors, and they lose their identity. The ones that survive are the ones that go back to their roots and double down on what makes them unique. Sonia shook her head in wonder. You're absolutely right. I got so caught up in expansion and competition that I forgot why I started in the first place. I wanted to create spaces where African hospitality could shine. where our culture, our warmth, our creativity could be celebrated. Somewhere along the way, I buried all of that under layers of corporate strategy. You can get it back, Piper said confidently. You just have to decide to. Sonia smiled through her tears. I'm deciding right now. What's your fourth idea? Piper's eyes lit up. Tech integration with human touch. Explain. So your competitors have all this fancy technology, right? Apps for check-ins, smart rooms, keyless entry, all that stuff. And you're worried you can't compete with that because it's expensive and you're already struggling financially. Exactly. But what if you did both? What if you had all the tech stuff but you paired it with something they don't have? Real human connection that's rooted in culture. Piper drew 2 columns in her notebook. Tech and human. So guests can use an app to check in, super convenient, super modern. But when they arrive at the hotel, they're greeted personally by a cultural ambassador. Not just a front desk clerk, but someone who's deeply knowledgeable about the local area, the local culture, the local hidden gems that tourists never find. Someone who can recommend the best local restaurants that aren't in guidebooks, who can connect them with local experiences, who can make their stay feel personal and curated. Sonia was nodding vigorously. Yes, I see where you're going. The rooms can be smart rooms with all the latest technology. But on the pillow, there's a handwritten welcome note from someone in the local community. Maybe a local artist, maybe a local elder, maybe a local young person pursuing their dreams. Something personal. Something that makes the guest feel seen and valued, not just like a transaction. Piper tapped the human column for emphasis. You have a virtual concierge for basic stuff like ordering room service or requesting extra towels. But you also have human experts available for experience curation. People who can design a custom itinerary based on what the guest is interested in. Someone interested in music gets connected with local musicians. Someone interested in food gets a personalized culinary tour. Someone interested in art gets private gallery visits. Sonia was laughing now, but it was a laugh of joy, of relief, of finally seeing a path forward. So I'm not competing with the big chains on technology. I'm using technology as a foundation, and then I'm building something on top of it that they can't replicate because it requires genuine cultural knowledge and human connection. Exactly. And that's your competitive advantage. They can't copy it. They don't have the deep roots in these communities that you have. They can't suddenly develop 40 years of relationships and cultural understanding. It's yours and yours alone. Sonia wanted to hug this child. This brilliant, wonderful, completely unexpected child who had appeared beside her on the worst day of her professional life and was now handing her the blueprint for survival. One more idea, Piper said, holding up 5 fingers. Corporate partnership reimagining. I'm listening. You said your corporate contracts are drying up because companies are cutting travel budgets. But you've been targeting the wrong corporate clients. What do you mean? You've been competing for the same clients as Hilton and Marriott. Big multinational corporations that just need cheap, convenient places to house traveling employees. Those contracts are all about price and you can't win on price. But what if you targeted African diaspora businesses instead? Black-owned companies, African-owned companies, international companies that are doing business in Africa and need cultural competency alongside their accommodations. Sonia leaned forward, completely absorbed. These companies need more than just hotel rooms, Piper explained. They need to understand the markets they're entering. They need cultural context. They need connections to local business communities. They need to not make embarrassing mistakes because they don't understand local customs or communication styles. Piper drew a bridge in her notebook. Your hotels become bridges. Bridges between global business and African markets. You offer packages that include accommodation plus cultural competency training plus networking with local business leaders plus guided introductions to local suppliers or partners. You position yourself as essential infrastructure for anyone doing business in Africa. Sonia felt like she was in a dream. Every single one of these ideas was not only brilliant but actionable, practical, realistic, and completely different from anything her consultants had proposed. And for African diaspora businesses specifically, Piper added, your hotels become homecoming spaces. Places where they can reconnect with their heritage while doing business. That's powerful. That's emotional. That creates loyalty that goes way beyond price competition. Sonia sat back in her seat, overwhelmed. 5 complete strategies, each one addressing a different aspect of her struggling business, each one leveraging her unique strengths instead of trying to copy her competitors. All from a 9-year-old girl with a backpack full of notebooks. The tears came again, but this time Sonia did not try to hide them. She let them flow freely, tears of relief and gratitude, and something she had not felt in so long she almost did not recognize it. Hope. Real, solid, achievable hope. Piper, you've just saved my company. Piper blushed, pushing her glasses up her nose. I just like solving puzzles. This is so much more than puzzles. This is vision. This is strategy. This is understanding human psychology and market positioning and brand differentiation at a level that most business school graduates never achieve. Sonia turned to look at James across the aisle. Mr. Owusu, your daughter is extraordinary. James was shaking his head slowly, still trying to process what he had just witnessed. I knew she was smart. I knew she liked business stuff. But this? I had no idea. Where did you learn all of this? Sonia asked Piper. Piper shrugged, looking a little shy now. I watch a lot of YouTube videos about business turnarounds. There's this series about companies that were almost bankrupt and then came back. I've watched every episode like 3 times. And I read business books from the library. And I just think about things a lot. My dad says I overthink everything. This is not overthinking, Sonia said firmly. This is strategic thinking of the highest order. She paused, an idea forming. Piper, I have a board meeting in 1 week. A very important board meeting where I need to present a turnaround strategy for my company. Would you be willing to help me develop these ideas further? Maybe even present them to my board? Piper's eyes went wide. Really? You want me to present to your board of directors? I absolutely do. These ideas need to be heard, and they need to be heard from you. You have a clarity and passion that will be compelling. What do you say? Piper looked at her father, who was still sitting in stunned silence. Dad? Can I? James blinked, trying to catch up with what was happening. Piper, this is a billion-dollar company. A real board of directors. This isn't a game. I know it's not a game, Piper said seriously. But I can help. I know I can. Sonia reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, handing it to James. Mr. Owusu, I understand this is unusual. But I promise you I am completely serious. Your daughter has given me more valuable insights in 1 hour than my paid consultants have given me in 6 months. If she's willing, and if you give permission, I would like to hire her as a consultant for my turnaround strategy. James took the card with trembling hands. Mensah Luxury Hotels. Sonia Mensah, CEO and founder. A phone number. An email address. This was real. This was actually happening. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Piper whispered urgently, tugging on his sleeve. Sonia smiled gently at James. I know this seems strange. But I built my business by trusting my instincts, and my instincts are telling me that your daughter is special. Truly special. I would be honored to work with her. She paused, then added thoughtfully. What do you do, Mr. Owusu? What's your work? James felt embarrassed suddenly. Here was this billionaire CEO, and he was just a struggling contractor barely making ends meet. I run a small construction company. Mostly residential work. Repairs, renovations, small commercial jobs. How's business? James hesitated, pride warring with honesty. It's been tough. I bid on bigger projects, but I can't compete with the larger firms. They have more equipment, more manpower, established relationships with the big clients. I'm good at what I do, but I can't seem to break through to the next level. Sonia nodded sympathetically. I understand that struggle. I lived it for years. The gap between where you are and where you want to be can feel impossible to cross. Exactly. The plane's engines changed pitch slightly, and the captain's voice came over the intercom announcing their descent into Accra. The flight was almost over. This conversation, this miraculous encounter, was coming to an end. Sonia felt a surge of urgency. She could not let this end here. She could not let this brilliant child and this honest, hard-working father disappear back into their lives without finding a way to work together. Mr. Owusu, I'm serious about wanting Piper's help. Would you be comfortable with her consulting on my turnaround strategy? I would compensate her fairly, of course, and I would work around her school schedule. Nothing that would interfere with her education or her childhood. James looked at his daughter, seeing her in a completely new light. All this time he had thought she was just a kid who liked watching business videos instead of cartoons. He had not realized she was actually absorbing the information, synthesizing it, applying it to real problems. His little girl was a strategic thinker. A consultant. A problem solver. What do you think, Piper? Is this something you want to do? Piper nodded so vigorously her glasses nearly fell off. Yes. I really want to help Miss Mensah save her hotels. James took a deep breath and made a decision. Okay. Yes. We'll help however we can. Sonia's smile was radiant. Thank you. Thank you both. You have no idea what this means to me. She pulled out her tablet and opened a new contact entry. Can I get your phone number and email address? Piper grabbed a piece of paper from her notebook and carefully wrote down her father's contact information in her neat, precise handwriting. She handed it to Sonia, who entered it into her tablet immediately. I'll call you tomorrow, Sonia said. We can set up a time to meet, maybe over the weekend. I want to develop these ideas more fully before the board meeting. And Piper, if you're comfortable with it, I'd love for you to present directly to the board. Your passion and clarity will be powerful. The plane touched down smoothly on the runway in Accra. The familiar thump and screech of landing, the gradual slowing, the relieved applause from some passengers. But Sonia barely noticed. Her mind was already racing ahead, imagining how she would implement these strategies, how she would present them to the skeptical board, how she would transform her struggling empire into something vibrant and unique and alive again. Piper was bouncing slightly in her seat with excitement. I can't believe I'm going to present to a real board of directors. James was still processing everything. Piper, do you understand what you just did? You might have just saved this woman's entire company. Piper looked thoughtful. I hope so. Her hotels sound really cool. They just needed to remember what made them special. As the plane taxied to the gate, Sonia reached over and took Piper's small hand in hers. Thank you, Piper. From the bottom of my heart. You appeared beside me on the worst day of my professional life, and you gave me something I thought I had lost. You gave me hope. Piper squeezed her hand back. You're welcome, Miss Mensah. I think your hotels are going to be amazing. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Passengers began standing, retrieving bags from overhead compartments, shuffling toward the exits. The normal chaos of deplaning. But for 3 people in rows 11 and 12, nothing felt normal anymore. James stood and pulled down their bags, still feeling like he was in a dream. His daughter, his 9-year-old daughter, had just been hired as a consultant by a billionaire. This could not be real. But the business card in his pocket said otherwise. Mensah Luxury Hotels. A real company. A real opportunity. Sonia gathered her things slowly, reluctant for this flight to end. An hour ago, she had been drowning in despair, convinced her empire was finished. Now she had a strategy. A vision. And the most unlikely consultant she could have imagined. They made their way off the plane together, walking through the jet bridge into the Accra airport. The familiar sights and sounds of home. But everything felt different now. At the entrance to the terminal, they paused. I'll call you tomorrow, Sonia said again, wanting to make sure James knew she was serious. We'll be waiting, James replied. Sonia knelt down to Piper's eye level. Thank you again, Piper. You're going to do amazing things in your life. I'm honored to be one of the first people who gets to work with you. Piper beamed. I can't wait to help save your hotels, Miss Mensah. They went their separate ways then. Sonia to her driver waiting in the VIP area, James and Piper to the taxi stand. But both of them kept looking back, making sure this had really happened, that this was not just some vivid dream brought on by altitude and exhaustion. In the taxi on the way home, Piper chattered excitedly about the presentation she would give, the research she would do, the strategies they would implement. James listened, marveling at his daughter's enthusiasm and brilliance. Piper, how did you know all that stuff? About brand positioning and market differentiation and all those business concepts. Piper thought about it. I don't know, Dad. I just see patterns. Like when you taught me about construction, you said every building tells a story through its design and materials. Business is the same. Every company tells a story, and sometimes they forget their own story and start trying to tell someone else's. Miss Mensah forgot her story. I just helped her remember. James felt a lump in his throat. When had his little girl become so wise? I'm proud of you, you know that? I know, Dad. Your mother would have been so proud too. Piper went quiet for a moment, remembering the mother who had died when she was only 5. Do you think Mom would have liked what I did today? I think your mom would have been amazed. Just like I am. In her car, Sonia was on the phone with her assistant, her voice animated and energized in a way it had not been for months. Effia, I need you to clear my schedule tomorrow afternoon. I have a consultant I need to meet with. And I need you to prepare materials for a board presentation. I'm completely revising my turnaround strategy. Her assistant, Effia, who had worked with Sonia for 15 years, was surprised by the sudden change in her boss's demeanor. Madam, are you all right? You sound different. I'm better than all right, Effia. I'm hopeful. For the first time in months, I'm actually hopeful. I'll explain everything tomorrow. As she hung up, Sonia looked out the window at Accra passing by. Her city. Her home. The place where her journey had begun 40 years ago with nothing but a dream and determination. She had lost sight of that journey, lost connection with the passion that had driven her to build something from nothing. But a 9-year-old girl on an airplane had reminded her, had given her the roadmap back to herself. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the answer you are searching for is sitting right beside you, offering you a napkin and asking if you are okay. Sometimes all you need is someone to see you clearly, to remind you of who you really are beneath all the corporate strategy and competitive pressure. Sonia smiled to herself, feeling lighter than she had in years. The real work would start tomorrow. Developing the strategies, preparing the presentation, facing the skeptical board, fighting for her vision. But tonight, for the first time in a very long time, Sonia Mensah went to sleep believing that she could win. And across the city, in a modest house in a middle-class neighborhood, Piper Owusu fell asleep with her notebook open beside her, filled with sketches and ideas and strategies that would change not just one company but 2 families forever. Would you take business advice from a child if they were the only one making sense? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to find out what happens when Piper walks into that boardroom and whether a 9-year-old can really convince a group of skeptical executives to bet everything on her vision, you need to subscribe right now because what comes next will blow your mind. 3 days passed. 3 days during which James Owusu convinced himself that the airplane encounter had been nothing more than a polite conversation between strangers. A pleasant distraction for a wealthy woman having a bad day. He had tucked Sonia's business card into his wallet, but he did not expect to ever use it. Billionaires did not actually hire 9-year-old consultants. That was absurd. That was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not in real life. On the 3rd day, James was at a construction site, overseeing a bathroom renovation in a modest apartment building. His phone rang. A known number. He almost ignored it, thinking it was probably a telemarketer, but something made him answer. Hello. Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Mr. James Owusu? The voice was professional, polished, the accent speaking of expensive education and corporate environments. Yes, this is James. Mr. Owusu, my name is Sonia Mensah. I'm the executive assistant to Sonia Mensah, CEO of Mensah Luxury Hotels. Ms. Mensah asked me to contact you regarding a consulting opportunity for your daughter, Piper. James froze, the hammer in his other hand suspended in midair. This could not be real. This had to be a scam. Some elaborate phishing scheme. I'm sorry, who is this again? Sonia Mensah, executive assistant to Sonia Mensah. You met Ms. Mensah on a flight from Lagos to Accra 3 days ago. She was very impressed with your daughter's insights and would like to invite Piper to present her strategic recommendations to our board of directors. James almost laughed. This was definitely a scam. Look, I don't know what you're trying to sell, but I'm not interested. Mr. Owusu, I assure you this is completely legitimate. Ms. Mensah was quite specific about the conversation she had with you and Piper on the flight. She mentioned that Piper provided 5 strategic recommendations for revitalizing the Mensah Hotels brand, including a cultural immersion program, mentorship suites, a heritage story campaign, tech integration with human touch, and corporate partnership reimagining. James felt his knees go weak. No one could know those specific details unless they had actually talked to Sonia. This was real. This was actually real. I don't understand. You want my 9-year-old daughter to present to a corporate board? Yes, sir. Ms. Mensah believes Piper's perspective and passion will be compelling to the board members. We would like to schedule a video presentation for this Friday at 2 p.m., if that works with Piper's school schedule. Friday. That was 2 days away. This Friday? That's very soon. Ms. Mensah has a board meeting scheduled where she needs to present her turnaround strategy. She would like Piper to be part of that presentation. Of course, we understand this is short notice. If the timing doesn't work, we can explore alternatives. James's mind was spinning. His daughter. Presenting to a board of directors of a multinational hotel company. This was insane. This was impossible. Can you send me some kind of confirmation? Something official? Absolutely. I'll email you right now with official letterhead, meeting details, and a video conference link. What email address should I use? James gave her his email, still half convinced this was an elaborate hoax. But 2 minutes later, his phone pinged with an incoming email. He opened it with trembling hands. The email was from an official Mensah Luxury Hotels domain. The letterhead was crisp and professional, featuring the company logo he had looked up online after the flight. There was a formal invitation addressed to Piper Owusu, consultant, inviting her to present to the board of directors on Friday, November 15th at 2 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. The video conference link was included, along with technical specifications and a confidentiality agreement for James to review and sign. At the bottom was a personal note from Sonia. James, I meant every word I said on the plane. Piper is extraordinary, and her ideas deserve to be heard. I'm looking forward to working with you both. Sonia Mensah. James sat down heavily on a stack of lumber, staring at his phone. This was actually happening. That evening, when he picked Piper up from school, he could barely contain his mixture of excitement and anxiety. Piper, I got a call today. From Miss Mensah's assistant. Piper's eyes lit up. Really? What did she say? She wants you to present your ideas to the board of directors. This Friday. Via video call. Piper squealed so loudly that several other parents in the pickup line turned to look. This Friday? That's so soon. I need to prepare. I need to make a presentation. Dad, can I use your laptop? James laughed despite his nervousness. Yes, you can use my laptop. But Piper, are you sure you want to do this? These are serious business executives. They might ask hard questions. They might not take you seriously because you're a kid. Piper's expression became serious and determined. I can do this, Dad. I know I can. Miss Mensah believes in me. You have to believe in me too. James felt his throat tighten with emotion. I do believe in you, sweetheart. I just don't want you to be disappointed if things don't go well. They will go well. I'm going to save her hotels. And with that simple, confident declaration, Piper got to work. James's laptop was old, a battered machine he used mostly for sending quotes and invoices. But Piper treated it like it was the most advanced technology in the world. She downloaded free presentation software, found free design templates online, and began constructing her pitch. For the next 2 days, Piper worked with an intensity James had never seen from her. She came home from school and immediately went to the laptop. She researched case studies of successful experiential hotels. She looked up statistics on millennial and Gen Z travel preferences. She found examples of heritage-based branding campaigns that had revitalized struggling companies. She created graphs and charts showing projected revenue increases based on premium pricing for unique experiences. Where was she getting all this information? How did a 9-year-old know how to do market research and financial projections? James watched her work late into the evening on Wednesday night, her small face illuminated by the laptop screen, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Piper, it's almost 10 p.m. You need to get some sleep. Just 5 more minutes, Dad. I need to finish the cost-benefit analysis for the cultural immersion program. Cost-benefit analysis. His 9-year-old daughter was doing cost-benefit analyses. On Thursday evening, the night before the presentation, Piper insisted on practicing. She set up the laptop in the living room, pulled up her presentation, and stood in front of the mirror practicing her delivery. James sat on the couch, watching in absolute amazement. Piper stood straight, her voice clear and confident, despite the glasses sliding down her nose and the gap where she had recently lost a tooth. Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Piper Owusu, and I'm here today to present a comprehensive turnaround strategy for Mensah Luxury Hotels. This strategy is built on 5 core pillars that leverage the company's unique strengths while addressing current market challenges. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a professional-looking title card, Rediscovering Identity, a Return to Authentic African Luxury. The fundamental problem facing Mensah Hotels is not a lack of quality or service. It's a crisis of identity. In attempting to compete with international luxury chains, Mensah Hotels has obscured the very qualities that make it unique and valuable. James felt chills run down his spine. His little girl sounded like a seasoned business consultant. Piper continued, walking through each of her 5 strategies with remarkable poise. She explained the cultural immersion program, detailing how partnerships with local artisans would create unreplicatable experiences. She described the mentorship suites, citing research showing that remote workers and digital nomads were willing to pay premium prices for community and workspace amenities. She outlined the Heritage Story campaign, showing examples of brands that had successfully leveraged founder stories to create emotional connections with consumers. She presented data. She showed projections. She anticipated objections and addressed them preemptively. She was professional, articulate, and utterly compelling. When she finished her practice run, she turned to James with anxious eyes. How was it, Dad? Was it okay? James had to wipe his eyes before he could answer. Piper, that was incredible. You're going to blow them away tomorrow. You really think so? I know so. But even as he said it, James felt a knot of worry in his stomach. What if the board did not take her seriously? What if they saw this as a publicity stunt or a joke? What if they dismissed her ideas because she was just a child? He could not bear the thought of Piper being humiliated or rejected. That night, James barely slept. He kept imagining the presentation, imagining all the ways it could go wrong, imagining Piper's face if the board laughed at her or condescended to her. But when he checked on her before going to bed, Piper was sleeping peacefully, her notebook open beside her pillow, filled with additional notes and ideas. She was not worried. She believed in herself completely. Friday arrived. James took the afternoon off work, claiming a family emergency. He and Piper set up the laptop at the kitchen table, testing the video connection multiple times to make sure everything worked perfectly. Piper wore her nicest dress, a blue one with white flowers that she usually saved for church. She had insisted on looking professional. At 1:55 p.m. they logged into the video conference. The screen showed a waiting room message. Piper sat up straight in her chair, her hands folded in her lap, looking simultaneously like a nervous child and a composed professional. At exactly 2 p.m. the screen changed. Suddenly they were looking at a large boardroom. A long table with 8 people seated around it. And at the head of the table, Sonia Mensah, looking elegant and confident in a dark suit. "Good afternoon, Piper." "Good afternoon, Mr. Owusu. Thank you so much for joining us." Sonia's smile was warm and encouraging, but Piper could see the tension in her eyes. This presentation mattered. This was not just a courtesy or a feel-good exercise. This was real and the stakes were high. "I'd like to introduce you to our board of directors," Sonia continued, gesturing to the people around the table. "This is Kwame Boateng, our chief financial officer." Kwame was a stern-looking man in his 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and an expression that suggested he had seen every business fad and gimmick imaginable and was not impressed by any of them. He nodded curtly at the camera, his skepticism evident even through the video screen. Abina Osei, our chief operating officer. Abina was a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, dressed impeccably, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked curious but guarded, her arms crossed as she studied Piper through the screen. Sophia Ajay, our marketing director. Sophia was younger, maybe in her 30s, with a creative energy that came through even on video. She smiled genuinely at Piper, leaning forward with interest. Sonia introduced the other board members. The head of human resources, the chief technology officer, the director of operations, and 2 external board members representing major investors. Each one looked more imposing than the last. These were serious people who made million-dollar decisions. And they were about to listen to a 9-year-old. "Piper has developed a comprehensive turnaround strategy that I believe addresses the core challenges we've been struggling with," Sonia said, her voice carrying the weight of someone staking their reputation on what came next. "I've asked her to present her ideas directly to you because I believe her perspective and insights are exactly what we need. Piper, the floor is yours." Piper took a deep breath. James, sitting beside her just out of camera range, saw her hands tremble slightly. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. "Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Piper Owusu, and I'm here today to present a comprehensive turnaround strategy for Mensah Luxury Hotels." She shared her screen and her presentation appeared. The title slide looked professional despite being created on an old laptop with free software. "Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm 9 years old, and I'm not a traditional business consultant. But sometimes being outside a system helps you see it more clearly. Sometimes not knowing what's supposed to be impossible helps you imagine what could be possible." Kwame made a small sound that might have been a snort. Piper ignored it. The fundamental problem facing Mensah hotels is not a lack of quality or service. It's a crisis of identity. In attempting to compete with international luxury chains, Mensah Hotels has obscured the very qualities that make it unique and valuable. She clicked to the next slide, which showed 2 side-by-side images. On one side was a generic luxury hotel lobby that could have been anywhere in the world. On the other was a vibrant African marketplace full of color and culture. "Right now, Mensah Hotels looks like this," she pointed to the generic lobby. "But it should look like this," she pointed to the marketplace. Not literally, of course, but metaphorically. It should feel authentically African, distinctly regional, unreplicatable by global chains. Abina leaned forward, her skepticism softening slightly into genuine interest. Piper walked through her first strategy, the cultural immersion program. She showed examples of boutique hotels around the world that had successfully partnered with local artisans and cultural practitioners. She cited a hotel in Mexico that featured rotating exhibitions of indigenous art and had seen occupancy rates increase by 34% while raising prices by 22%. She showed data from a hotel in Japan that offered traditional tea ceremonies and calligraphy classes and had become one of the most sought-after properties in Kyoto. These hotels succeed because they offer something unreplicatable, Piper explained. You can find a nice bed and fast Wi-Fi anywhere. But you can only experience authentic Akan Kent weaving or Yoruba drumming or Maasai beadwork in specific places with specific cultural practitioners. That's competitive advantage that can't be copied. She clicked to a detailed implementation plan. For the pilot program, I recommend starting with the flagship Accra property. Partner with the local artisan cooperative to create a rotating gallery in the lobby. Commission a different artist every quarter. Host opening receptions where guests can meet the artists and learn about their work. Create artist residencies where guests can take classes. Partner with the Ghana Music Academy to host evening performances of traditional music with educational components. Piper had spreadsheets. She had timelines. She had estimated costs and projected revenue increases based on premium pricing for cultural programming packages. Kwame was no longer lounging back in his chair. He was leaning forward now, studying the numbers on his own screen. The initial investment for the pilot is approximately $180,000, Piper said, anticipating his question. But based on comparable properties, I project this could increase occupancy by 20 to 25% and justify a 15 to 18% price increase, resulting in a net revenue increase of approximately $750,000 annually for this property alone. ROI within 4 to 5 months. Sophia, the marketing director, was grinning openly now. Abina was taking notes. Piper moved to her second strategy, mentorship suites. She showed research on the growing digital nomad market, currently estimated at 35 million people globally and growing at 20% annually. She explained how traditional hotels were failing to serve this demographic-specific needs. These travelers don't just need a bed. They need a workspace, a community, a professional network. They're willing to pay premium prices for environments designed specifically for their needs. She showed floor plans she had sketched of how existing suites could be retrofitted with dedicated workspace, upgraded technology, and soundproofing. She outlined partnership opportunities with local business schools and entrepreneurship organizations to create programming. The genius of this approach, Piper said, sounding far older than her years, is that you're creating network effects. Each guest becomes part of a community. They meet other ambitious, interesting people. They form business relationships, friendships, collaborations. They don't just remember the hotel. They remember the connections they made, the ideas they developed, the growth they experienced. That creates loyalty that transcends price competition. She had calculated everything. The cost of retrofitting suites. The pricing premium they could charge. The occupancy rates they could expect based on other co-working and co-living spaces. The potential for corporate partnerships and long-term residency packages. Even Kwame was nodding now, grudgingly impressed. The Heritage Story campaign was next. Piper showed examples of brands that had successfully leveraged founder stories. She showed Patagonia's emphasis on Yvon Chouinard's climbing background. She showed how Ben & Jerry's built an empire partly by emphasizing their Vermont origins and values-driven approach. Ms. Mensah's story is extraordinary, Piper said, her voice gaining emotion. A woman who started with one bed and breakfast and built an empire across 12 countries. A self-made billionaire from Africa. A widow who kept building even after losing her partner. This story represents African excellence, Black entrepreneurial success, the power of vision and determination. She clicked to mock-ups of social media campaigns she had designed. Timeline posts showing Sonia's journey. Video concepts featuring Sonia talking about pivotal moments in building the business. Partnership opportunities with influencers and media outlets focused on Black entrepreneurship and African business success. Younger travelers, especially Black travelers from the diaspora, will connect powerfully with this narrative, Piper explained. Every stay becomes participation in a legacy. Every booking becomes support for African excellence. That emotional connection translates to loyalty and premium pricing power. Sophia was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement, already imagining the marketing possibilities. Piper's fourth strategy, tech integration with human touch, addressed the board's concerns about falling behind on technology without requiring massive capital investment. You don't need to outspend your competitors on technology, Piper said. You need to pair technology with something they can't offer: genuine cultural knowledge and human connection. She outlined a hybrid model: mobile check-in, smart rooms, and virtual concierge for basic services, but cultural ambassadors for personalized experience curation. She showed examples of hotels that had successfully blended high-tech convenience with high-touch personalization. The big chains can install the same technology you can, but they can't develop 40 years of community relationships overnight. They can't suddenly acquire deep cultural expertise. That's your sustainable competitive advantage. Finally, the corporate partnership reimagining. Piper showed data on African diaspora businesses, international companies expanding into African markets, and the growing demand for cultural competency training. Instead of competing for generic corporate contracts based on price, target companies that need more than just accommodation. Offer packages that include lodging plus cultural competency workshops plus networking with local business leaders plus guided market entry support. She had researched average prices for cultural competency training, calculated package pricing, and projected the number of corporate clients they could realistically attract. You become essential infrastructure for doing business in Africa, not just a place to sleep. When Piper finished, having spoken for nearly 40 minutes with remarkable poise and depth, she looked directly into the camera. I know I'm just a kid. I know I don't have an MBA or decades of business experience. But sometimes fresh eyes see things that experienced eyes miss. Ms. Mensah built something extraordinary, and she just needs to remember what made it special in the first place. Thank you for listening. The boardroom was silent. Completely silent. 8 successful executives staring at their screens, processing what they had just heard from a 9-year-old. The silence stretched. Piper's confidence began to waver. Had she done something wrong? Had they hated it? Then Sophia started clapping. A moment later, Abina joined her. Then the CTO. Then the others until the entire board was applauding. Kwame was not clapping, but he was nodding slowly, a grudging respect in his expression. Sonia was beaming, tears glistening in her eyes. Thank you, Piper. That was extraordinary. I'd like to open the floor for questions. Kwame spoke first, his voice gruff but not unkind. Young lady, those are impressive projections. But implementation is always harder than theory. How do you propose we execute the cultural immersion program without it becoming a logistical nightmare? Coordinating with local artisans, managing rotating exhibitions, scheduling performances, that's a lot of moving parts. Piper did not hesitate. You're right that it's complex. That's why I recommend starting with just one property as a pilot. Hire a dedicated cultural programming coordinator for that property. Someone who already has relationships in the local arts community. Start small, maybe just one gallery space and one performance per week. Test, learn, refine. Only scale after you've worked out the operational challenges. Kwame's eyebrows raised slightly. That was a reasonable answer. A mature answer. Abina asked next. The mentorship suites concept is intriguing, but how do we avoid cannibalizing our existing customer base? Won't we just be converting regular guests to this new category without actually growing revenue? Again, Piper had an answer ready. The target demographic is different. Mentorship suites target long-term stays from remote workers and entrepreneurs. Your current customers are mostly short-term business travelers and tourists. There's minimal overlap. Plus, the community aspect actually drives referrals. Satisfied mentorship suite residents will recommend regular accommodations to their professional networks who need short-term stays. Sophia jumped in, her enthusiasm bubbling over. I love the Heritage Story campaign. But I'm curious, are you suggesting we center the entire brand around Ms. Mensah personally? What happens when she eventually retires? Does the brand identity collapse? Piper had clearly thought about this too. The initial campaign centers on Ms. Mensah because her story is powerful and timely. But the long-term brand identity is about what her story represents. African excellence, entrepreneurial achievement, authentic cultural connection. Over time, the brand becomes bigger than one person. It becomes about the values and the experience. Ms. Mensah is the foundation, but the building can outlast her active leadership. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Every board member probed different aspects of the strategy. And every time, Piper had thoughtful, nuanced answers. Sometimes she admitted she did not know something, which somehow made her more credible. Sometimes she suggested areas for further research. But mostly, she demonstrated a depth of strategic thinking that left the board increasingly impressed. Finally, Sonia called for a vote. You've all heard Piper's presentation and had a chance to ask questions. I'm proposing we implement a 6-month pilot program based on these strategies, starting with our Accra flagship property. We'll need to allocate approximately $400,000 for initial implementation across all 5 strategies. At the end of 6 months, we'll evaluate results and decide whether to scale company-wide. I'd like to call for a vote. The room fell silent again. This was the moment. Would they actually approve a turnaround strategy developed by a 9-year-old? All in favor? Hands went up around the table. Sophia immediately. Abina after a moment's consideration. The CTO. The HR director. The operations director. One of the external board members. 6 votes in favor. Opposed? Kwame raised his hand. So did the other external board member, an older gentleman who had remained silent throughout the presentation. 2 opposed. The motion carries 6-2, Sonia announced, her voice shaking with emotion. We will implement the pilot program. Piper, on behalf of Mensah Luxury Hotels, I want to formally engage you as a strategic consultant for this initiative. We'll work out appropriate compensation, and I hope you'll continue to advise us as we implement your recommendations. Piper's face broke into the biggest smile James had ever seen. Yes, I'll help. Thank you so much. Even Kwame cracked a small smile at her enthusiasm. After the formal meeting ended and the board members began logging off, Sonia stayed on the call. Piper, you were magnificent. Everything I hoped for and more. You convinced them. You actually convinced them. Do you really think it will work? Piper asked, suddenly vulnerable now that the pressure was off. I think it's the best chance we have. And more than that, I think it's the right direction regardless of outcome. You helped me remember who I am and what I'm building. That's invaluable. Sonia turned her attention to James. Mr. Owusu, you've raised an extraordinary daughter. I hope you're proud. James, who had been silent throughout the entire presentation, his heart in his throat, finally found his voice. I'm beyond proud. I don't even have words. We'll send over a consulting contract early next week. I want Piper to have weekly check-ins with our implementation team as we roll out the pilot program. And of course, she'll be compensated fairly for her expertise. After they hung up, Piper threw her arms around her father. We did it, Dad. We're going to save her hotels. James hugged her tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. You did it, sweetheart. That was all you. But the victory celebration was brief, because the real work was about to begin. Over the following weeks, Sonia moved with the energy and focus of someone who had found their purpose again. She hired a cultural programming coordinator for the Accra property, a young woman named Jackie who had managed arts programs for the National Museum and had extensive connections in the local creative community. She reached out to the Accra Artisan Cooperative, explaining the vision and inviting them to partner. The artisans were initially skeptical. Too many times they had been approached by businesses wanting to exploit their work without fair compensation. But when they met Sonia and heard about Piper's involvement, about the genuine desire to showcase African culture authentically, they began to warm to the idea. The hotel lobby was redesigned. The generic international corporate art was removed. In its place, a dedicated gallery space was created, with proper lighting and information placards. The first featured artist was a master Kent weaver named Kofi, who had been practicing his craft for 50 years. His intricate geometric patterns were displayed alongside photographs of his workshop and explanations of the symbolism embedded in traditional designs. Sonia hired a construction team to retrofit 5 suites into mentorship suites. She reached out to the University of Ghana Business School about partnership opportunities. She connected with co-working spaces and entrepreneur networks across the city. And she hired Sophia's marketing team to begin developing the Heritage Story campaign. Photographers came to document Sonia's original bed and breakfast, which still stood in a quiet Accra neighborhood. Videographers interviewed Sonia about her journey, her struggles, her triumphs. The content was raw and real and deeply moving. Through it all, Piper was involved. Every Friday after school, she joined a video call with Sonia's implementation team. She reviewed progress, offered suggestions, brainstormed solutions to emerging challenges. She was the youngest person on every call, but increasingly she was treated as an equal. Her ideas were taken seriously. Her input was sought and valued. The Accra property underwent a transformation. The lobby gallery became a gathering place, with evening receptions where guests could meet featured artists over wine and conversation. Local musicians performed traditional pieces, explaining the history and cultural significance of the music. The hotel restaurant brought in guest chefs from different regions of Ghana, each showcasing their local cuisine and teaching cooking classes. The mentorship suites filled up almost immediately. Remote workers and entrepreneurs from across the world booked month-long stays. Community formed quickly. Residents met each other at breakfast, collaborated in the shared workspace, attended networking events together. Several business partnerships emerged from connections made at the hotel. The social media campaign launched with a video of Sonia standing in front of her original bed and breakfast, telling the story of how she had started with nothing but a dream. 40 years ago, I cleaned these rooms myself, she said in the video, her hand resting on the doorframe. I cooked breakfast for my guests. I answered the phone at midnight when travelers needed help. I poured everything I had into making people feel welcome, into sharing the warmth and beauty of Ghanaian hospitality. Somewhere along the way as my business grew, I forgot that simplicity. I forgot what made this place special. But someone recently reminded me. And now I'm going back to my roots, back to what made me fall in love with this work in the first place. The video went viral within days. African diaspora communities shared it widely. Travel influencers picked it up. News outlets ran stories about the billionaire CEO who was being advised by a 9-year-old. Bookings began to climb. Slowly at first, then faster. People wanted to experience this transformation. They wanted to be part of this story. And in a modest house across the city, Piper Owusu continued going to school, playing with her friends, and being a regular 9-year-old kid. Except now, once a week, she also consulted for a multinational hotel company and helped save $1 billion empire. James watched his daughter navigate this surreal dual existence with amazement. She never let it go to her head. She never acted superior or showed off. She was still the same curious, thoughtful girl who loved puzzles and asked too many questions. But she had proven something important, something that would shape the rest of her life. That age was not a barrier to wisdom, that fresh perspectives had value, that courage and clear thinking could change the world. The pilot program was underway. 6 months to prove that these strategies could work, that Piper's vision could save Sonia's legacy. The clock was ticking. But for the first time in years, Sonia Mensah went to work every day with hope in her heart and fire in her spirit. She was building something meaningful again. Something authentic. Something true. And it all started because a 9-year-old girl noticed a stranger crying on an airplane and had the courage to offer help. Do you think age matters when it comes to good ideas, or should we listen to wisdom wherever it comes from? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want to find out whether Piper's strategies actually saved the company and what unexpected reward awaits her father, you absolutely need to subscribe right now because what happens next will leave you speechless. The first 2 months of the pilot program were brutal. Not in the way Sonia had feared, with catastrophic failure and immediate collapse, but in a way that was almost worse. Slow, ambiguous, uncertain progress that gave ammunition to the doubters while not providing enough evidence to silence them. The numbers told a frustrating story. Occupancy at the flagship Accra property had increased, yes, but only by 8%. 8%. After all the investment, all the restructuring, all the bold promises, they had managed to move the needle from 52% occupancy to 60%. Better than nothing, but hardly the transformation they needed. The cultural immersion program was operational. Kofi the Kent Weaver had his exhibition in the lobby. Evening music performances were happening 3 times a week. The cooking classes were running. But guest participation was modest. Some travelers engaged enthusiastically, spending hours talking with artists and attending every event. But many guests walked past the lobby gallery without stopping, treated the musicians as background ambience, skipped the cultural programming entirely. The mentorship suites were performing better, with 3 of the 5 consistently booked, but 2 remained stubbornly empty. The community was forming among the residents who were there, but it was slower than projected. The social media campaign was gaining traction, with Sonia's origin story resonating with audiences, particularly in African diaspora communities. But views and likes did not immediately translate to bookings. The gap between digital engagement and actual revenue remained frustratingly wide. In the boardroom, Kwame Boateng was sharpening his knives. "We're 2 months in and we've seen an 8% increase in occupancy," he said at the progress review meeting, his voice dripping with skepticism. "At this rate, it will take us 2 years just to get back to industry standard occupancy, let alone achieve the premium positioning we were promised. We've invested $400,000 for results that we could have achieved with a simple price discount campaign." Sonia felt the old familiar weight settling on her shoulders. The doubt. The second-guessing. Had she been foolish to bet everything on the vision of a 9-year-old child? But she held firm. 2 months is not enough time to judge a fundamental brand repositioning, she countered. "We're not just trying to fill rooms. We're trying to change how the market perceives us. That takes time. Time we may not have," Kwame shot back. "Our cash reserves are limited. Every month of mediocre performance brings us closer to insolvency." Abina, the COO, was more measured but still concerned. I think the strategies have merit, but perhaps we need to adjust our timeline expectations. Maybe we should scale back the investment until we see more concrete results. That evening, Sonia called Piper for their weekly check-in. She tried to keep her voice upbeat, but Piper heard the strain immediately. "What's wrong, Miss Mensah?" Sonia sighed, too tired to maintain pretense. "The board is losing confidence. The numbers aren't moving fast enough. Kwame wants to abandon the pilot program." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Piper's young voice, thoughtful and calm. "What does the data say about who's actually booking? Like, where are the new guests coming from?" Sonia pulled up the analytics report. "Most of the increase is coming from international bookings. African diaspora travelers from the US, UK and Canada. Very few domestic or regional bookings yet." "That makes sense," Piper said. "Your Heritage Story campaign is resonating with diaspora communities who are looking for authentic connection to their roots. But you haven't focused marketing on them specifically. You've been trying to reach everyone, which means you're reaching no one effectively." Sonia felt a spark of hope. "What are you suggesting?" "Focus everything on the African diaspora market for the next 2 months. Stop trying to compete for generic business travelers and tourists. Target diaspora travelers specifically. Partner with African diaspora organizations, cultural associations, heritage travel groups. Sponsor events in cities with large African populations. Get African diaspora influencers to visit and share their experiences. Go all in on the one market segment that's already responding." Sonia was already making notes. "Once you own that market," Piper continued, "once you become the go-to destination for diaspora travelers seeking authentic African experiences, then you expand. But right now you're spreading your resources too thin. Concentrate your fire." It was the military strategy term Piper had picked up from one of her videos about business turnarounds. Concentrate your fire. Focus all your resources on the point of greatest opportunity. Sonia took the recommendation to her marketing director, Sophia, who embraced it immediately. Within days, they had pivoted the entire marketing strategy. They reached out to African diaspora cultural organizations in major US and UK cities. They sponsored heritage travel programs. They connected with Black travel influencers and offered complimentary stays in exchange for authentic coverage. But nothing prepared them for what happened in month 4. Her name was Keisha Williams, an African-American travel influencer with 800,000 followers on Instagram and a popular YouTube channel called Finding My Roots. She had built her following by documenting her journey reconnecting with her African heritage, visiting different countries, learning about culture and history, exploring the complicated legacy of the diaspora. Keisha had seen Sonia's origin story video and was moved by it. She reached out to the hotel, and Sophia immediately offered her a complimentary week-long stay at the Accra property, with full access to all the cultural programming. Keisha arrived skeptical. She had stayed at many hotels that claimed to offer authentic cultural experiences, but delivered tokenistic gestures and superficial engagement. She expected this would be similar. But from the moment she walked into the lobby and saw Kofi's Kent exhibition, something shifted. The gallery was not decorative background. It was a serious, respectful presentation of master craftsmanship. The placards explained the history, the symbolism, the generations of knowledge embedded in the patterns. Kofi himself was there, working at his loom in a corner of the lobby. Not as a show but actually creating. Keisha approached him and they began talking. Kofi explained the meaning of the patterns he was weaving, showed her the techniques passed down from his grandfather, talked about how Kent was not just fabric but a language, a history, an identity. They talked for 2 hours. Keisha filmed part of the conversation, tears streaming down her face as Kofi explained a particular pattern that represented perseverance through hardship. "My ancestors wore this pattern," Kofi said softly. "When things were difficult, when the harvest failed, when grief came, they wrapped themselves in this pattern to remember that hard times pass, that we endure, that we survive." Keisha's voice broke as she thanked him. That evening she attended the music performance. Not a show for tourists, but real musicians playing traditional Ghanaian pieces, explaining the history and meaning of each song, inviting guests to learn basic rhythms and participate. She took the cooking class, learning to make groundnut soup from a chef who had learned the recipe from her grandmother, who had learned it from her grandmother, an unbroken chain of knowledge and tradition stretching back centuries. She stayed in one of the mentorship suites and connected with other residents, including a Ghanaian entrepreneur building a tech startup and a Nigerian writer working on a novel. They had dinner together, shared stories, talked late into the night about dreams and challenges and the complexity of African and diaspora identity. On her fourth night there, Keisha sat in her room and recorded a video. She did not script it, did not plan it, just spoke from her heart. I'm sitting in Accra right now at the Mensah Hotel, and I need to talk about what I've experienced here because it's breaking me open in the best way. Her voice was raw with emotion. I've traveled to 15 African countries trying to connect with my heritage, trying to understand where I come from, trying to feel like I belong somewhere. And I've stayed at luxury hotels and budget hostels and everything in between. But I've never experienced anything like this. She showed clips of her conversation with Kofi, of the music performance, of the cooking class. This is not a hotel trying to capitalize on African culture. This is African culture welcoming you home. The woman who owns this hotel, Sonia Mensah, started with one bed and breakfast 40 years ago. She built this empire from nothing. And she's using it now to create spaces where people like me, diaspora people who are searching for connection, can actually find it. Keisha's face filled the screen, tears running down her cheeks. I met a Kent weaver who spent 2 hours teaching me about the patterns my ancestors wore. I learned to cook food that tastes like something I've been missing my whole life without knowing I was missing it. I sat with musicians who explained songs that have been sung for centuries. I connected with other Black professionals and entrepreneurs from across the world, and we shared our stories and our struggles and our dreams. She wiped her eyes. This is what I've been looking for. This is what so many of us are looking for. Not a vacation. Not a nice hotel room. But a place where we can touch our roots, where we can feel the connection to something ancient and beautiful in ours. She held up a piece of Kent cloth that Kofi had given her. Kofi gave me this. It's the perseverance pattern. He said my ancestors would want me to have it, to remember that I come from people who survived everything, who endured everything, who are still here in me, in us. Her voice broke completely. If you're diaspora, if you've ever felt disconnected from your heritage, if you've ever wanted to understand where you come from, you need to experience this. Not just this hotel but what this hotel represents. African excellence. African hospitality. African culture celebrated and shared with open hands. She ended the video with a direct appeal. Support this. Support Sonia Mensah. Support what she's building. Because this is what healing looks like. This is what coming home feels like. She posted the video late that night, thinking it would reach her usual audience, maybe generate a few thousand views. By morning it had 500,000 views. By the end of the day, it had 1.5 million. By the end of the week, it had 3 million views and had been shared across every major platform. News outlets picked it up. Other influencers reshared it. African diaspora communities across the world were talking about it. And the bookings started flooding in. Not a trickle. Not a steady increase. A flood. Within 2 weeks, the Accra property went from 60% occupancy to completely sold out for the next 3 months. The mentorship suites had waiting lists. The cultural programming events were packed. Guests were calling from the US, the UK, Canada, the Caribbean, wanting to experience what Keisha had described. The phone in the reservations office rang constantly. The website crashed from traffic and had to be upgraded. Sophia's marketing team could barely keep up with the inquiries. The surge was not just at the Accra property. Guests were calling about other Mensah properties across Africa, wanting to know if they offered similar cultural programming. The demand was exposing the opportunity. Travelers wanted this experience in Lagos, in Nairobi, in Cape Town, everywhere. By month 5 the numbers were undeniable. The pilot property had reached 85% occupancy, the highest in its history. But more importantly, the revenue per room had increased by 50% because guests were paying premium prices for the cultural programming packages, for the mentorship suites, for the authentic experience. Guest satisfaction scores were at the highest levels the company had ever recorded. Reviews were glowing. People were not just satisfied with their stay, they were emotionally moved by it. They were writing paragraphs about how the experience had changed them, connected them to their heritage, made them feel seen and valued. Even Kwame had to admit the turnaround was real. At the 5-month board meeting, Sonia stood before the same people who had been skeptical 6 months earlier. The pilot program has exceeded our most optimistic projections, she said, unable to keep the triumph out of her voice. We're not just filling rooms. We're commanding premium prices while delivering experiences that create deep emotional loyalty. This is sustainable competitive advantage. She clicked to the financial projections. I'm recommending we begin company-wide rollout immediately. We adapt the model to each property based on local culture and market, but the core principles remain: authentic cultural immersion, community building, heritage storytelling, technology paired with human connection. The vote was unanimous. Even Kwame voted yes, though he looked like it pained him. The stock price, which had been languishing for months, began climbing. Investors who had written off Mensah Hotels as a declining legacy brand started paying attention again. Industry analysts who had predicted the company's demise began writing articles about the most remarkable turnaround in the hospitality sector. And at the center of it all was a 9-year-old girl who had seen what MBA consultants had missed. 6 months to the day after that airplane conversation, Sonia called James. Not for a weekly Piper check-in, but specifically to talk to him. "James, I need to talk to you about something important," Sonia said, her voice formal. James felt a flutter of anxiety. Had something gone wrong? Had they decided they did not need Piper's consulting anymore? "Of course, Miss Mensah. What is it?" "First, I want to thank you for raising such a remarkable daughter. Piper has saved my company. Not metaphorically. Literally saved it. We were months away from bankruptcy, from being forced out by the board, from losing everything I had built over 40 years. And your daughter gave me the roadmap to survival." "She's pretty special," James said, emotion thick in his throat. "She is. And I want to show my gratitude appropriately. I know you've been compensating Piper for her consulting time, and that's right and proper. But I want to do something more. Something meaningful. Miss Mensah, you don't need to do anything more. Piper has loved being involved. It's been an incredible experience for her. I insist. But first, tell me about your construction business. How are things going?" James hesitated. Things were going the same as they always had. He was surviving, getting by, but not thriving. He had bid on another municipal contract last month and lost again to a larger firm. He was doing good work, but he was trapped at a certain level, unable to break through to the larger opportunities. "It's steady," he said, which was a polite way of saying stagnant. "Still mostly small residential work?" "Yes. Some small commercial jobs. But the bigger contracts, the major projects, those go to the established firms with more resources and connections. What if I could help change that?" James felt his heart rate increase. "What do you mean?" "The pilot program's success means we're rolling out the transformation company-wide. All 46 remaining properties need renovations to implement the cultural programming spaces, the mentorship suite retrofits, the upgraded technology infrastructure. We're looking at a comprehensive renovation program across 12 countries." She paused, letting that sink in. "I need a general contractor for the African properties. 12 properties across Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. The total project value is approximately $80 million over 3 years." James's phone nearly slipped from his hand. $80 million? "Yes. It's a massive undertaking. And I want to offer you the contract to lead it." The world seemed to tilt. $80 million. That was more money than James had handled in his entire career combined. That was not just a life-changing opportunity. That was a reality-altering opportunity. But reality crashed back in immediately. "Miss Mensah, I'm honored truly. But my company is too small for a project like this. I have 6 employees. Basic equipment. I've never handled anything over $200,000. This is way beyond my capacity." "Right now, yes," Sonia agreed. "But capacity can be built. I'm not offering you charity, James. I'm offering you investment." "I don't understand." "I will provide an advance payment that you'll use to acquire equipment and hire personnel. You'll partner with an experienced project manager I'll assign, someone who has overseen multi-million-dollar international projects. You'll have mentorship and support. But you'll be the lead contractor. Your company. Your name on the work." James felt dizzy. This could not be real. But why? Why take a risk on me when you could hire established firms who've done this 100 times? Sonia's voice softened. "Because your daughter taught me something important. She taught me that potential matters more than credentials. She taught me that fresh perspectives and genuine commitment can achieve what experience and convention cannot. Someone once took a chance on me when I was just a woman with one bed and breakfast and a dream. I'm paying that forward." She paused. "But let me be absolutely clear. This is not charity. The contract includes performance benchmarks, quality standards, timeline requirements. If you fail to deliver, the contract terminates and you'll be replaced. This is a real business arrangement with real expectations. I'm betting on your integrity and work ethic, but you have to deliver results." James was silent, overwhelmed. "I need to think about this." "Of course. Take 48 hours. Discuss it with Piper, with your family. This is a huge decision. But James, I believe in you the same way I believe in your daughter. You both see problems clearly and solve them with integrity. That's worth more than any amount of experience. That night, James could barely sleep. He kept running numbers in his head, imagining the possibilities, terrifying himself with all the ways it could go wrong. An $80 million project. It was absurd. It was impossible. But was it? The next morning he talked to Piper while driving her to school. Miss Mensah offered me something yesterday. Something big. Piper looked up from her notebook, curious. What? She wants my company to be the lead contractor for renovating all her African properties. It's an $80 million contract over 3 years. Piper's eyes went wide. Dad, that's amazing. But I told her I can't do it. It's too big. I don't have the experience, the equipment, the staff. I've never handled anything close to that scale. Piper frowned. But you could learn, right? You're good at construction. You just need to scale up. It's not that simple, Piper. If I fail, I could lose everything. I could go bankrupt. I could let down Miss Mensah after everything she's done for us. Piper was quiet for a moment, thinking. Dad, do you remember what you told me when I was nervous about presenting to the board? What did I say? You said I could do it because I had prepared well and I believed in my ideas. You said the board needed to hear my perspective even if I was scared. You said courage is doing the right thing even when you're afraid. James felt his throat tighten. You taught me to solve problems, Piper continued. You taught me that buildings tell stories and that good work speaks for itself. You taught me to be brave. Now you have to do the same thing. Out of the mouths of babes, James thought. His 9-year-old daughter was teaching him about courage. What if I fail? What if you succeed? Miss Mensah believes in you. I believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself. That evening, James called Sonia back. I'll do it. I accept the contract. He could hear the smile in Sonia's voice. I'm glad. You won't regret this, James. I promise you that. And she was right. The contract was signed within a week. Sonia provided an advance payment of $2 million to be used for equipment acquisition and initial hiring. She assigned an experienced project manager named Mensah, no relation to Sonia, who had overseen major renovation projects across Europe and Asia. James hired carefully. He brought on experienced foremen, skilled craftsmen, project coordinators. He invested in modern equipment and project management software. He partnered with local subcontractors in each country where they would be working. The learning curve was steep. There were moments of panic, moments when James was sure he had made a terrible mistake. But Mensah, the project manager, was patient and thorough, teaching James the systems and processes needed to manage complex, multi-site projects. The first renovation was the Accra property they had piloted. James's team transformed it methodically, professionally, on time and under budget. When Sonia inspected the completed work, she was genuinely impressed. This is excellent, James. Better than I expected. And with that validation, James's confidence grew. 1 year after that airplane conversation, the transformation was undeniable. James Owusu Construction now employed 45 people. They had completed the Accra renovation ahead of schedule and were simultaneously working on properties in Lagos and Nairobi. James had landed additional contracts from other companies who were impressed with his work on the Mensah projects. His revenue had increased by 800%. He had paid off all his business debts, bought a modest but comfortable house for himself and Piper, and even started a fund to support other small contractors trying to scale up. Mensah Hotels had recovered 80% of its stock price losses. The pilot program had been successfully rolled out to properties across the company's portfolio. Each property adapted the model to its local context: Kent weaving in Accra, bronze casting in Benin, beadwork in Kenya, wire art in South Africa. But the core principles remained consistent: cultural authenticity, community building, heritage storytelling. Sonia was named African Entrepreneur of the Year by the African Business Council. In her acceptance speech, she did something that shocked the audience. I'm honored to receive this recognition, but I need to be honest with you about how this turnaround happened. 18 months ago, I was on the verge of losing everything. My company was failing. My board wanted me out. I had lost sight of what made my business special in the first place. The audience was silent, riveted. And then I sat next to a 9-year-old girl on an airplane. Her name is Piper Owusu. She noticed I was crying and offered me a napkin. And then she proceeded to provide better strategic consulting than any of the expensive experts I had hired. Sonia smiled at the absurdity of it. Piper is the youngest consultant in Mensah Hotels history. She saw what decades of business experience had blinded me to, that my uniqueness was my strength, that my story was my brand, that authentic cultural connection was the competitive advantage global chains could never replicate. She saved my company. A 9-year-old child with notebooks full of ideas and the courage to share them with a stranger. The story went viral globally. News outlets across the world ran features on the 9-year-old consultant who saved $1 billion company. Business schools began studying the Mensah turnaround as a case study. Piper was invited to speak at conferences, to appear on television, to be interviewed by major publications. James was fiercely protective of her through it all. He limited media appearances, ensured she maintained her normal school schedule, made sure she still had time to be a kid. Piper still loved playing with her friends, watching cartoons, going to the playground. She was still a regular 9-year-old in most ways. But she was also the youngest consultant in the history of a multinational corporation. She still had her weekly calls with Sonia's team, still provided strategic input on new initiatives, still thought about business problems the way other kids thought about games. Universities began reaching out, offering to track her progress, hinting at future scholarships. But James and Sonia agreed that Piper's childhood should be protected. The opportunities would still be there when she was older. Sonia became more than a business contact. She became a mentor, a friend, an honorary grandmother figure. She and Piper talked regularly about business, yes, but also about life, about values, about what it meant to build something meaningful. 2 years after that fateful airplane encounter, Sonia hosted a gala at the transformed Accra flagship property to celebrate the turnaround. The lobby where Kofi had once sat alone at his loom was now filled with hundreds of guests. Business leaders, government officials, travel industry executives, artists, musicians, entrepreneurs. James and Piper were invited as guests of honor. Piper, now 11 years old, had grown taller, lost a few more teeth, but retained that same curious, thoughtful expression that had first caught Sonia's attention on the airplane. When Sonia invited Piper to the stage to say a few words, the crowd fell silent. Piper stood at the podium, looking small but composed. "Hi everyone. I'm Piper. I'm 11 now, but I was 9 when I met Miss Mensah on an airplane. She was crying and I offered her a napkin, and then we started talking about her hotels. She pushed her glasses up her nose, a familiar gesture. A lot of people have asked me how I knew what to tell her, how a kid could understand business strategy. But honestly, I just see problems as puzzles. And my dad taught me that buildings tell stories through their design and materials. Miss Mensah's hotels were trying to tell someone else's story instead of their own. I just helped her remember her real story." The crowd was hanging on every word. I think grown-ups sometimes make things too complicated. They forget the simple questions like, what makes you special? And why should people care? Those are the most important questions. Everything else is just details. Piper smiled. Miss Mensah is special because she built something amazing from nothing. Because she believes in African culture and African excellence. Because she's brave enough to change when change is needed. Her hotels are special because they help people connect with their heritage, with their roots, with something real and meaningful. She looked directly at Sonia. Thank you for listening to me even though I was just a kid. Thank you for believing that good ideas can come from anyone. And thank you for teaching me that business is not just about money. It's about meaning. The applause was thunderous. Sonia was crying openly now, not bothering to hide the tears. When the applause died down, Sonia took the stage. Piper is right. I had lost sight of meaning in pursuit of market share. I had forgotten that the best businesses are not the ones that maximize profits but the ones that maximize purpose while sustaining themselves financially. She paused, composing herself. 2 years ago I was hours away from giving up. From accepting that my board was right, that I should step aside, that my time was over. My pride had made me blind to what made my business special. I was so focused on competing with global chains that I forgot I had something they could never have. My story, my connection to these communities, my authentic relationship with African culture and hospitality. Sonia looked at Piper with profound affection. And then a child saw what highly paid consultants with MBAs and decades of experience had missed. She saw clearly because she had no preconceptions about what was supposed to work. She asked simple questions and listened carefully to the answers. She thought strategically but also emotionally, understanding that people do not just buy products or services, they buy meaning and connection. Sonia pulled an envelope from her pocket. Tonight, I want to announce the establishment of the Piper Owusu Scholarship Fund. This fund will provide full university scholarships to young African entrepreneurs who demonstrate exceptional potential, regardless of their current circumstances or conventional credentials. Because Piper taught me that potential matters more than pedigree, that insight can come from anywhere, that we should invest in people who see clearly and think bravely. The applause was deafening. Piper was blushing, overwhelmed. The fund will support its first cohort of 10 students next year. To date, planning for the fund has involved 47 young entrepreneurs from across the continent. Each one selected not for their grades or test scores but for their vision, their problem-solving ability, their courage to imagine something better. Sonia's voice broke. Piper saved my company with napkin and curiosity. I want to give other young people the chance to save their own futures with support and belief. Later that night, after the formal program ended, James, Piper, and Sonia stood together on the hotel balcony, looking out over Accra. How does it feel? James asked Sonia. Having your company back on solid ground? Sonia smiled. It feels like remembering who I am. Like coming home to myself. She looked at Piper. You gave me that. You reminded me that my journey was not a weakness to hide but a strength to celebrate. Piper leaned against her father. I just asked questions. You did all the hard work. The right questions at the right time can change everything, Sonia said. They stood in comfortable silence, three people whose lives had intersected by chance and been forever changed by courage. 2 years after a 9-year-old girl offered a napkin to a crying stranger on an airplane, the ripple effects continued to spread. Mensah Hotels now operated 63 properties across 15 countries, each one celebrating authentic regional culture while providing modern comfort and community. The brand had become synonymous with heritage travel, with African diaspora homecoming, with meaningful cultural exchange. James Owusu Construction had completed renovation projects in 8 African countries and was now bidding on government infrastructure contracts. His company had become known for quality work, ethical practices, and commitment to training and supporting local workers. He donated regularly to programs supporting small contractors, remembering his own struggles and wanting to help others climb the same ladder. Piper was still consulting for Mensah Hotels, still attending her weekly strategy calls, still providing insights that surprised and delighted the executive team. But she was also still a kid who loved reading fantasy novels, playing with her friends and solving math problems for fun. James made sure she had both worlds, the extraordinary opportunity to apply her talents and the ordinary childhood every kid deserved. The Piper Owusu Scholarship Fund had supported 47 young entrepreneurs in its first 2 years. Several were already launching businesses. One had developed a mobile app connecting rural farmers with urban markets. Another had created a sustainable fashion line employing artisans in her village. Another was building a network of affordable childcare centers for working mothers. Each one had been told the story of how the scholarship came to exist. How a 9-year-old girl had saved a billion-dollar company by seeing clearly and speaking bravely. How kindness to a stranger had created opportunities for hundreds of people. How courage and clarity could change the world. And it all started because Piper Owusu noticed someone crying and had the simple human decency to ask if they were okay. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the smallest gestures. A napkin offered to a stranger. A child willing to share her ideas. A billionaire humble enough to listen. An opportunity extended with generosity. Courage to accept a challenge beyond your experience. Sonia had needed to remember her story. James had needed someone to believe in his potential. Piper had needed permission to use her gifts. And they had all needed each other, though none of them knew it until they met. 3 people. 1 airplane. 1 conversation. And hundreds of lives changed forever. Because wisdom does not always come from expected places. Sometimes it comes from a 9-year-old with a backpack full of notebooks and the clarity to see what adults have learned to overlook. Sometimes the person sitting next to you has exactly what you need, if you are humble enough to listen. Sometimes kindness creates opportunities that ambition never could. And sometimes the napkin offered to a crying stranger is the beginning of everything. If you could go back and tell yourself one thing before a moment that changed your life, what would it be? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that wisdom can come from anywhere and that kindness creates ripples we can never fully predict, subscribe to this channel right now because we share stories of unexpected connections, unlikely heroes, and the profound impact of simple human decency. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss another story that might just change how you see the world.